Welcome everyone. Today I'm going to talk about why how I got into tarot and ultimately talk about my spiritual awakening. And the reason for this video is actually thanks to Chosen One 144's YouTube channel. He released a video today actually, and I was in the kitchen at the time. I don't know, it's cooking or washing dishes, but he was really just calling, like now's the time, guys, if we're all in the collective together, right? But now's the time to really talk about our spiritual awakenings, right? So he called in the video for us to, talk about our spiritual awakenings, like get the messages out there, The energies are shifting, guys, if you know what I'm talking about, right? If you know, you know, but the energies are shifting and we're moving into the new earth. Like, I am feeling so hopeful and so just energetically blessed. And so we'll get started. And I guess I'm going to start with a little bit of a background. And my apologies, my cat just had dinner, and so he is a little rambunctious. But anywho, so a little bit of background. I grew up in Houston, Texas. My father is Arab and my mother is Spanish and Mexican. So that makes me half Arab and half Hispanic. I grew up Muslim. My mother converted to Islam before marrying my father. And life was good, guys. I can't really complain. It was definitely my own experience, and but overall, so again, so my mother converted to Islam. So her side of the family, she was raised Catholic, and yeah, that was pretty much it. So I experienced my childhood, and then when it came time to, and even like as I throughout childhood, I've always been, I consider myself, for example, I always have kind of considered myself the black sheep of the family. I was firstborn generation here in the US, and so but anyway, so then growing up, I always had a passion for knowledge and knowing things, but I always feel like I had that like fortitude to question, right? Or to just like, it was just like my soul. It was like, for example, like, my father is Muslim, my mom converted, I'm Muslim, like, you get the concept, right? And it's like, okay, that's how you're raised, but I still was always questioning, okay, but why are there multiple religions? And there were things like that I would just question, right? But, those are side stories. So, so then it came time to go to college, and it was just something that like just happened, right? I feel like my mom was very big on that. Was just it was like after high school, like, so, and my parents, I think they each went to school, like have some college under their belt, but not like a completed degree. So so I did have the opportunity to get my degree, but I went to surprisingly I went to a Christian university. And the reason ultimately that I made this decision is because at the time I wanted to go to school for nursing. I think I had my eyes set on like becoming a nurse practitioner or a nurse anesthetist. But either way, and I'm happy, I ended up switching gears and studying psychology and biology. Nonetheless, the reason, if I didn't mention, for choosing that university is it had one of the top, I think it was like one of the top 5 or if not top nursing school in Houston, maybe even in Texas. Forgive me. My cat is just going wild. So anyway, I think I was pretty much finished talking about, well, right, so I went to the Christian university, and I had the opportunity, I really pushed to be able to live on campus. I mean, truth be told, I really just wanted to get out of the house, and just not be under the same roof as my parents. They're good parents, not to say. It's just, I just wanted to be out of that. And so, anyway, at my time there as well, part of attending that university is I took Old Testament, New Testament, Christian doctrine, and then we had to do a certain amount, I don't remember now, 600-ish or 900-ish hours of church hours. And there was actually a church on campus, so I would go get the hours there. So, of course, that I had that whole experience, and I do remember, my father had a book in the house. It was my parents had a really pretty big bathroom, and I just remember it was like under this little partition area. He had there was a basket of books, and then one in there that was just called World Religions, and it always piqued my interest. I would flip through it, but I never actually really read through it. But so again, I just always had that mindset of curiosity. After college, actually, right after I graduated, I pretty much just went into the science industry, and I started working, and then pretty much from there in 2016, I met someone there that came to my job to do clean room certifications, and we ended up getting married within a year. Okay, and he happened to be Christian, so he was raised Christian. So we were married for about, I would say, right under 5 years, and I'll get to that. But anyway, so I mean, I can't tell my whole life story here, but I bring that up for a reason. So anyway, so got married in, I think it was 2016, and then in 2020, I don't know, it's just, I don't really remember the details. It's just we weren't, I wasn't happy. It was just, we weren't necessarily really getting along. I feel like at that time I was starting to realize that I got married for the wrong reasons, so it was just kind of one of those things where it's and I'll talk about the books that led to my spiritual awakening, but a really big thing was you're living this dream of the planet, or it's these expectations, right? He was a very nice gentleman, guys. When I tell you, truly, he's a very kind soul and very good person. So when we met, it was well, this is the woman every man would want, this is the man every woman would want to marry. I felt safe in his energy. It was I knew that he was gonna ultimately treat me good, right? And he did. But I just, ultimately wasn't, I just fell out of love, or I wasn't in love with him. So, but anyway, so that actually all happened right, before, I think we attempted to try and fix, continue to try and or fix things, reconcile. I don't know if that's the right word, but anyway, ultimately, funny enough, so right toward the end, right before I decided to make that separation, he had a really good friend that he grew up with, and this friend happened to recommend a book to him called The 4 Agreements. Yes. And so I'm thinking, or was it? Anyway, yeah, so The 4 Agreements, and so then my husband read it or whatever. I don't remember if it was an audiobook or he had the book, but recommended I read it. So at the time, I had just actually left. It was right, I said 2020. It was like right after COVID, the start of 2021. I decided to get out of the science industry, of which I had been in for roughly 10 years. And excuse me, I was going to talk on something. I was like, it's not necessary. But anyway, at the time I was going to school for lash extensions. And at the time I was living out I had just moved, I was living in Massachusetts for 5 years and working over there in the biotech industry. When I decided to, that was all after COVID, move back home to Texas. And I was in the like, Temple, Waco area. So I was kind of out there, and I was going to school in Austin. So I had about like an hour and 20-minute drive roughly. That's when I got the audiobook, The Four Agreements, and excuse me, I would listen, I would listen to that on the way to school and back. And yeah, guys, I mean, I think I actually listened to it twice, because it takes you, it takes you a minute, especially if you're not really used to like hearing these kinds of messages. So it was so much at once, and it was just so much that I needed to hear it again to like really, start getting it, really like solidify what I'm hearing. And one of the biggest impactful phrases I remember from the Four Agreements, besides the actual Four Agreements themselves, is living in our own personal hell. And I mean, guys, when I heard, just when I heard it said like that, it literally like unlocked, I don't know, it just like, it just unlocked so much in my soul, to where it was like, it made me realize just how much power not even power, but just how much my focus and my actions and my, everything that I'm putting myself in is my doing, right? So if I'm staying in a relationship, and it wasn't even that I wasn't happy, but by default, if I'm staying in this relationship unhappy, ultimately that's like not being fair to him either. So interestingly enough, and we were both very honest with each, like we're always, we were very honest with each other. That I swear, guys, that book literally, it like pushed me to be like, yeah, I'm not living the life I want to live. Like I just really truly, I knew that wasn't it just wasn't what I was doing, was not that relationship, everything. It just wasn't, it wasn't my life path. It wasn't, where I was supposed to be going. And I kept feeling that. Guys, I felt it actually pretty much within the first like year maybe, where I realized like, but I stayed because it was like, well, we're married, or we're, like you start coming out where there's all these reasons why, well, but he's a good person, or but this, and it's like none of that shit matters. And anyway, I always told you guys, it was just like I said, growing up, I was always questioning stuff. So, where I'm always just like, you can call it selfish, and truly that's what we need to be in life, guys, because, people have always asked me how I've done, how I'm so happy, and there's been some interesting things or difficult things that I've done in my life that perhaps they surprise people, and then they're like, but how are you so happy? And I'm like, but how would I not be happy? I'm saying, like, why would that define me being unhappy? So anyway, yeah, that really, I wanted to separate, and I told my my husband at the time, and I told him, and I was like, look, I like, honestly, thank you for that book. It has really done a lot for me, and ultimately is the reason that I want to separate and move on with my life. Like I just you and I are just not compatible, and whatever. Like There was more to it, but I was very careful with my words, and funny enough, that is one of the four agreements, which is be impeccable with your words. So I kept it, very, very loving, very caring, very civil, but it was very blunt and like clean. It was like no confusion. It was like, no, this is like a split. You know what I mean? Like, and then we, of course, divorce papers and all that. So anyway, so as I said, at the time, I was going to lash school. And there were lash students, and then there were also esthetician students. And I particularly just wanted to focus on lashes and nothing else. And so that was my focus. Well, you could trade, services with the estheticians, right? So one day, just to like get extra hours in practice, I gave a lash set to one of the estheticians. We follow each other on Instagram still to this day. But I just remember, in a lash set, by the way, a full lash set, each eye has roughly about 90 to 120 lashes. So if you can imagine putting a single synthetic lash on each of your natural lashes, that takes roughly, and I say very roughly, 2 hours. In many cases, it could, more time is even ideal. But in a typical service, and in out there in the day-to-day, it would be about a 2-hour service. So we had 2 hours to talk. Now, not everyone talks, some people go to sleep, but that's besides the point. So this was a couple years now ago, so I don't really remember all the details of what we talked about, but it was a very nice conversation, and we really did bond in a short amount of time. Like, we could just, it's like our energies were hyping each other up, and that was the first time that I was actually, truly, that was the first time, now that I'm really reflecting on it, that I felt like I was having such a, not even just intellectual, but almost, I guess, a spiritual conversation. And even when I say spiritual, I didn't have my spiritual awakening yet, but something felt different about it. And anyway, it was just a very lovely whatever. Give her lashes. She's happy with them. I'm happy. And come back to school the next day, and she sees me in the hallway, and she just comes up to me, and she's like, hey, Leena, I just want to give you this book. Literally, that's it. I want to give you this book. That book that she gave me changed my entire life, and I will just literally forever be grateful to her. And I'm getting a little emotional because it's like, dude, the way that Source works truly is just so beautiful. Like the timing, the way that everything unfolds, and it literally works out the way it's meant to, guys. If you really sit down and just look, and it's not that hard to see, God and Source in your life. So the book that she gives me is The Astonishing Power of Emotions by Abraham Hicks. And it was cool. I was like, okay, awesome, I got a book. I had no idea really what it was about. I had just finished lash school in October, so she must have given it to me around like September, October time frame. And then I think I read it maybe around November or something like that. So because I do remember at the time I was still in Eddy, Texas, technically, so it was a very small town in Texas. But I remember I was alone that night in the house, and I was in one of the back rooms on the bed just relaxing, and I pulled out the book, The Power of Emotions, and I started reading it, and got through the preface. I'm in chapter 1, guys, like barely into chapter 1, and that's when my spiritual awakening happens. And it was a really cool moment. so I'm reading, and just like how I said with the four agreements, how it's like living in your own personal hell, that all it took was that one damn sentence, those few words, that phrase to just be like, I see now, I can see. Well, with the power, with the astonishing power of emotions, what this was my spiritual awakening right here. We made the decision, our souls, okay, each of our souls. So this is what I read, is that we made the decision to come into these physical bodies as a non-physical source. That, guys, that is all it took. It's as if, like, I don't know how to explain it. My third eye just opened, or my spiritual awakening happened, or in that instance, as soon as I read those words, guys, I started bawling. Again, I'm in the house by myself. It's like, I remember it was late in the night. It was evening time. It was dark out, and it was just the most beautiful, because what happened was, as soon as I read those words, guys, the best way I can describe it is having the feeling like, holy shit, I remember making that decision. It's just crazy. So that was my spiritual awakening right there. That definitely. So I consider the four agreements the precursor to my spiritual awakening, reading the Astonishing Power of Emotions. Once I had my spiritual awakening, and I don't really remember the details actually. It was probably I started really watching a lot of Abraham's videos on YouTube, in 2022, and especially after reading the book and really starting to learn about the law of attraction and manifestation and the vortex and things of that nature. And in addition to that, for some reason I kept having this nagging feeling to look up tarot readings, and so I decided to start on YouTube, because that was just the quickest way to do that. So I just looked up, I'm a Libra, and so I looked up Libra tarot readings. And I mean, honestly, guys, and that's why, it takes into account, that I've been fortunate to experience a lot of different, or at least study a lot of different religions and be curious about things. So, and also have that, scientific and also psychological background. So, so I felt like a pretty good footing of, or at least view of the world. Once I started really learning about manifestation, but really not only that, but frequencies and vibrations, guys, it wasn't hard to put two and two together, essentially, right? Because, every single thing, substance, are made up of atoms. And every single atom, even solids, right? Solids, like my desk is solid, but technically the atoms are still moving ever so slightly, even though the table's not moving, but the atoms are technically vibrating, right? They're slightly moving and vibrating at a specific frequency. So naturally then our body is vibrating, our cells are vibrating, so everything, nature, guys, it just, it makes so much sense to me to understand that we all come from source. There is a creator, essentially. So I really like to use the terms, source energy, and then our creator, right? Our creator, ultimately. And anyway, so as I was going along my spiritual journey, it was very confidently, guys. It was like maybe halfway through, mid 2022, but I denounced all religion, and I felt I just felt so at peace too, because it was like I finally rose, it's like I broke free from that dream of the planet, from, you know what I mean? Because it's like, I was, I always question, well, what makes this religion right, or what makes that religion right, or, but, and then I always saw the similarities between, the three major religions in the world, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So, why do two not eat pork, but one does? But then all three have similar, and it's, I would come across people too that, would question, me growing up Muslim and things like that. And it's funny because, and often I'll ask people if they've ever studied a religion outside of their own. And normally I would get no. They've only studied their own, and yet they're giving me, like they're coming at me about like, things. And it's just like, okay, well, that's cool. But I mean, again, for me, it was like, okay, this is great. I'm studying Islam, but I want to study it all and I want to know all, right? Because, yeah. So, anyway, not to get too off track, but yeah, guys. So, I finally, and that's why Abraham, Abraham Hicks, they termed these specific messages that they're getting, that we're getting from the vortex and from source energy. Abraham is because Abraham is at the basis of every religion, of every major religion, right? Which we said was Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But if you take those labels off and all the, below all that is the source. That's that's where I'm at now. I've not, and that's where I call myself, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, right? So I'm not building my spirituality through a certain lens of religion. I'm building my spirituality on literally what I resonate with, the wisdom out there, the ancient knowledge, and of course 100%, Abraham Hicks's messages resonate. So, that's my story, and I'm gonna go ahead and leave it here for now. But yeah, so basically at this point in my life, my calling now is to, I definitely have a calling to help spread the message, guys, to help spread, joy and all, the highest vibrations I can, to help people reach heaven on earth. That's really my goal. And tarot definitely spoke and called out to me, and I just resonated with it. So I've, started my, tarot reading journey, and that's what this channel, Love Death Tarot, is. I hope this helped, and I did enjoy making this video. Okay, I'll leave it here. I'll see you guys later.